Pani profesor, możemy rozpoczynać.
Good afternoon. I am very pleased to greet you in this online conference Beyond Europe. I am very happy to see you all, to welcome all of you, distinguished guests. Welcome to Poznań. Welcome to Faculty of Political Science and Journalism at Adam Mickiewicz University. Now let me introduce our panel members. Professor Marceli Burdelski from Wrocław University, Professor Mieczysław Sprengel from Adam Mickiewicz University. Unfortunately, up to now, couldn't connect with us Dr. Nicolas Levy from Political Academy of Science from Warsaw. In addition, we have on our panel Mr. Karol Starowicz. He is currently a doctoral student at Adam Mickiewicz University. And also Ms. Władysława Szowka-Plasz. Yes, from the Ukraine. She's a master's student of international relations at Adam Mickiewicz University. Let's start our presentation. First is Professor Marceli Burdelski.
One mistake, microphone. Yes. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, Mrs. Chair, and all friends. My topic is the Republic of Korea, the middle power concept. From 80s, this item and concept, the middle power, very popular in the study of international relations. From the Western perspective, will be Canada. Australia is not in the West, and the same look Anglo-Saxon tradition to approach. And from end 90s and begin 2000, the Republic of Korea, the country have a lot of success of modernization and going to the jumping tigers of the economy of the East Asia region, go to this concept. One definition is the political system stability, and we remember that in 80s, Republic Korea made this break of the dictatorship, military, Chun Doo-hwan, the first democratic elections and presidentship Kim Il-sung, from liberal president Roh Moo-hyun. This idea look Republic Korea like the middle power is very popular, and was the change for in Korea. in Korea, very important is the for the periodization political stand, the presidentship. After Roh Moo-hyun, we have two very conservative presidents. One Lee Myung-bak, and after Lee Myung-bak, the lady Park Geun-hye, now is in prison, 22 years, lot of the trials and sentence, and also the history. And now President Moon Jae-in look with very strong is prediction to this look for Republic Korea middle power. And for literature, I find very good Scott Snyder and a lot of authors from the Council of Foreign Relations in the United States. 110 pages report, look for Republic Korea, look the factors, economical, political, culture. Now is very important, the green energy is in the South Korean politics a very important factor. So this book is very cheap in Kindle, only $3.14. One in a very conservative Cato Institute opinion, Jeffrey Robertson. No, he is senior fellow. His position is, yes, Republic Korea is economic giant, 1,600,000,000 GDP. And for compared to Poland, the personal income GDP for 1 year is double like in Poland. And another problem is independence and political independence. Republic Korea still military, this is the problem, this armistice treaty, and is on control United Nations by a system of one United Nations command. American general is the same, have combined commandership of military force, and is OPCON 2015, and plan general was 2015. Republic Korea was in plan, and general still one tension with North Korea. And now for the COVID situation, this agreement for President Republic of Korea and General Staff will be take all responsibility, and commanding Republic of Korea Army, I think 2022 is possible, will be made great. And this Jeffrey Robertson write one big economic giant, lot of success, and another for this military system position, Republic Korea will be like a protectorate. I don't agree with this position. In this paper was analysis Roh Moo-hyun concept, Lee Myung-bak, Park Geun-hye. This Lee Myung-bak, Park Geun-hye was the look for Republic Korea like bridge, better United States and China. For now, commitment Moon Jae-in is the Republic Korea will be good connection and bridge between four powers. United States, People's Republic of China, Russian Federation, and Japan. This is a very good analysis. One Korean author, Yoon Chul, is a dean for Yonsei University School of International Studies. His analysis come to but one is now we know BRICS was the Brazil, India, Russia, China, and South Africa, and this construction is named MICTA. I think it's only dreams, not real, and countries like Mexico, Indonesia, Korea, South Korea, Turkey, and last is Australia in this construction. And I have no special connection and no cooperation look for this construction. This from Yonsei University, Professor Rao about this story. I find in Chatham House is the professor is a lady, Kim Sung-mi, and she is graduated PhD at Cambridge University, and I find a good paper, South Korea's middle power diplomacy, challenges and changes. And she looked for one. The analysis is in the internal factor, and one, Republic Korea is the member OECD, APEC, ADB, lot international organization, and from Republic Korea, a lot of was General Secretary General of United Nations Ban Ki-moon. Now a lot international institution, and this position is growing, and general look for this middle power in the future will be go to the full independence in conditions alliance system with United States, that Republic Korea have a lot of limitation. They have money for develop the better missiles like North Korea, and now was Korea Society made discussion about this proposal President Moon Jae-in on the declaration of the end Korean War, and it's General Roberts, former commander U.S. Force, United Nations Command and Combined Unifying Combined Commanders, said will be Finnish armistice, and America must be withdraw the troops, and the problem is a lot of limitation, the same for Navy, and this is a serious political problem. And for my conclusion, this initiative look Republic Korea like middle power it's good for the growing position, international position, diplomatic position, the same on economic field. And like Professor Kim write about this diplomacy, and it's a very good tool for made a lot of diplomatic goals, and I think in the future, when with plan of unification, and one now is trouble for President Moon Jae-in, diplomatic boycott of Beijing Olympics, that Republic Korea, President Moon reject participants in Quad. Quad is American initiative with Australia and Japan and China. And I saw 1 week ago that President Moon declared this diplomatic and political participants in opening ceremony in Beijing, and there will be trouble special for this declaration on and Cold War. The main, very important Chinese politician Yan Jiechi was visited Seoul, and he made support by President Xi to this declaration end of Korean War support. This is diplomacy. Now I think I finish my reflections. I will be continue to research and write a paper for Korean journal. Thank you very much. Oh.
Yes, just
microphone.
Yes. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. Maybe we can decide it if the question will be now or later after all presents. Maybe let's do like this. So I will invite the next presenters, Professor Mieczysław Sprengel. He has his presentation topic South Korea, Australia partnership and opportunity for strategic cooperation. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good day. I already my presentation prepared on the Polish language. I'm surprised you speak English, but it's no problem. I have some materials which one I can already, and I can read for you. Okay, my presentation analyzes recent trends in Australia-Korean economic relations, and then consider how they may affect or will be affected by security issue in the Asia-Pacific region. Australia-Korea economic relations remain overwhelmingly merchandise trades, which are in turn based on the complementarity of the two economies. This is followed by education and tourism services, which constitute the bulk of the bilateral service trade. In addition, both sides have undertaken mutual foreign direct investment, FDI, although this remains a minor proportion of each country's FDI. Although the Australia and Korea economic relation has expanded rapidly over recent decades, it has raised some issues and concerns. Australia, instead of exporting mainly raw materials, wants to diversify the bilateral economic relation with Korea to reflect its position as a sophisticated industry society. Korea wants to expand its export of high technology products and minimize its chronic trade deficit with Australia. Both countries have sought to address the issue and maintain continued success in the economic relationship. This is reflected in the recent embarking on the negotiations for a Korea-Australia free trade agreement. Interestingly, the security relationship between the two countries has never been seriously considered in conjunction with the rapid development of economic relations. There has never been an institutionally security relationship between the two countries until the joint statement Global and Security Cooperation was signed on March 5th, 2009. It remains to be seen how the initiative will transpire and what the security policy ramification will be for the future development of bilateral economic relations. And my presentation and also my article proceeds this problem in 6 sections. But on the end, I would like go maybe to some conclusion, because the article and presentation is very long. The article and also presentation has examined the recent Australia-Korean economic relationship and assessed its ramification for the two countries' security, especially security policies. Although overall bilateral economic relations have expanded remarkably over time, there is certainly room for the improvement, not only in trade, but also in FDI relation, which one is already done in 2014. The bilateral Manchurian trade relationship based on the complementarity of the two economies has slowed in the last decade compared with strong growth from the mid-1970s until the 1990s. This appears to be attributed to some decline in complementary as the Korean economy matches and the two countries gear toward knowledge-based economy. Serious trade between the two countries is limited to a few items and relatively low and lopsided down, with most flowing from Australia to Korea mainly in the growth sectors of travel and education. Between two countries, it also low and accounts for only a minor proportion of a respective total. And on that, I maybe some sentence also in Polish language I can send, if I can. Chciałem powiedzieć, że Korea w tej chwili jest państwem, które jest na trzeciej pozycji, jeśli chodzi o import i eksport pomiędzy tymi krajami. Pierwsze są Chiny dla Australii, Stany Zjednoczone i Korea. Jeśli można mówić o bezpieczeństwie, jakieś konkluzje, sentencje, to można powiedzieć, mogą te relacje zakłócić jedynie jakieś wydarzenia na Półwyspie Koreańskim. Jeśli byłyby takie, czy z Japonią, albo po prostu między dwoma krajami, albo jeśli by wyszły też jakieś problemy z Tajwanem i tutaj ingerencja Chin miałaby znaczący punkt. No ale można powiedzieć, że ta wymiana w tej chwili się handlowa wyrównała między tymi krajami. Nie ma takiej wielkiej, że tak powiem, przepraszam za wyrażenie, dziury ekonomicznej w bilansie. Jest to mniej więcej wyrównane. Kraje są po tym podpisaniu traktatu w 2014 roku o tej wymianie swobodnej handlowej zadowolone. Także można powiedzieć, że jest to pewien przykład, który kiedyś opisywałem, który nastąpił między Japonią i Australią w wymianie handlowej. Okay, thank you very much. Nie słyszymy pani profesor teraz.
Dziękuję bardzo. Thank you very much, Kamsahamnida. It was also very interesting and probably not so well known about relationship between South Korea and Australia. Let me now invite Władysława Szowkopias. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, as I mentioned before, she is our student. So the floor is yours, please start.
Okay, so may I share my screen to show
Yes,
the
please.
presentation?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Can you see my presentation?
Not yet. Yes, I just something I hope will appear. Okay, yes, I can see. All can.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So I would like to speak briefly about European Union and Korean cooperation in the post-COVID era, and I would like to focus more on the Green New Deal in Korea and European Green Deal. So I will briefly speak about their relationship overview, then focus more on the Korean Green New Deal, then on European and prospects of their future cooperation. So, as you know, actually, the European Union and South Korea relations have attracted growing attention in recent years, and there is always a clear trend towards a greater cooperation between both regions. And actually, during in 2020, the European Union and Korea celebrated 10th anniversary of the establishment of their strategic partnership, following the signature of free trade agreement in 2009 that applied since 2011. And the framework agreement also from 2014. And unfortunately, the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic at the beginning of 2020 presented both regions with new challenges, but also led to some further cooperation and possibility to strengthen their dialogue and give opportunities to develop these relations, and specifically in the area of climate and health security. As you know, President Moon Jae-in during the last European Korea summit declared that based on the achievements of the last 10 years, Korea will strengthen cooperation with the European Union and work together to prepare for the post-COVID era. On June 2020, South Korea actually held with the European Union a video conference meeting the President Moon Jae-in and European Council President Charles Michel, and also European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and they tried to highlight the importance of the bilateral relationships in the face of post-COVID era, and their priority was to control the spread of the disease and also recover from this economic downturn after the COVID-19. So both countries currently cooperating toward the green economic recovery after COVID-19. So it's a great importance. This issue is of great importance, and it's important to see the details of the Korean Green New Deal policy in light of the European Green Deal. So the importance of developing and implementing this the Green New Deal policy in Korea and rising demands for multilateral cooperation, smart investments and policymakers actions is to fight against climate change, but also at the same time to have its economic recovery based on the strategies of the Green Deal. So I would like to speak now about more Korean Green New Deal. So they presented actually in July 2020, President Moon Jae-in presented a 5-year strategy that is reminiscent of the plan of the US President Franklin Roosevelt in 30s, and its goal to accomplish South Korea's post-pandemic recovery, and it is based on 3 pillars: the digital New Deal, the Green New Deal, and the stronger safety net. So today I will speak specifically about the Green New Deal. And actually, it's aimed, South Korea's aim of the Green New Deal is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And also, as we will more deeply discuss, it mirrors some commitments made by the European Union. Actually, the United Nations and different environment groups welcomed this South Korea's commitment to net zero emissions, and the move was hailed by the EU climate chief, Frans Timmermans, who is in charge of overseeing the European Green New Deal. And he also talked that it's good to see another partner step up in the fight against climate change. And what differ Korean Green New Deal from previous policy measures is that it not only responds to climate crisis, but also it tries to eradicate social inequality and poverty. And actually, that is exactly with the line of the European Union approach. So Korean New Deal identifies 3 main areas and 8 specific implementation targets. So the first area is green transition of infrastructures. And it includes implementation of renewable energy, equipment, and high performance installation to make public buildings green and energy efficient. And it is planned as one of the largest projects that will create a lot of new jobs for people. And by conducting a comprehensive diagnosis on the climate and environmental challenges of a city, the government also plans to restore terrestrial, marine, and urban ecosystems. The second area of this deal is low carbon and decentralized energy supply. And some specific tasks include, for instance, the establishment of smart grid for more efficient energy measurement, and promoting also renewable energy use, and supporting a fair transition is also of another task. So they want to reduce greenhouse gases and fine dust, so to be more competitive in the future global car market, and also supply different electric and hydrogen vehicles. to have more eco-friendly environment. And the third area of the deal is innovation in the green industry, and they want to establish low carbon and green industrial complexes among their main tasks. And in order to lay this foundation for green innovation, a loan of about 2 trillion won was introduced for this green sector, and it also includes investments to prevent the environmental pollution of businesses, and also joint fund to made up by the public and also private sectors to foster these green businesses. As for the European Green Deal, so they are trying to move towards a resource efficient and competitive economic system, and they have a goal to realize this climate neutral society also by 2050. And among their also plans are the solutions for GHG reduction, resource circulation, and ecosystem restoration. That would cover all sectors of the economy, and it will be also financed by the with the EU budget together with the private investments. As such, European Green New Deal encompasses the implementation of the EU's GHG emissions reduction target by 2030, and this deal actually proposes a comprehensive climate action framework that includes a wide range of policy areas, and it emphasizes inclusively among union members. The major parts actually includes, the first one would be the not climate neutrality by 2050. The second one would be decoupling economic growth from resource use, and the third one just transition. And also under the European Green New Deal, their aim was also to establish a circular economy and preserve ecosystem biodiversity. So the European Union also presented the European Climate Law, and it is a powerful means to achieve net zero GHG emissions for EU countries, and it adopted some tools, mainly cutting emissions, investing in green technologies, and protecting also natural environment. And the legislation actually not only functions as a system for providing predictability, but also includes a monitoring mechanism for every 5 years. The European Union actually is clearly committed to green recovery from the COVID-19 crisis, and with the European Green Deal in its center. And actually, Europe has demonstrated already a more unified approach on global actions, both in the COVID-19 pandemic and in its environmental actions. And speaking about further prospects, in Article 1 of their framework agreement from 2014, the European Union and South Korea affirmed their commitment to cooperate to address global environmental challenges, in particular concerning their climate change. And they also agreed to develop new sustainable innovative measures and also different forms of renewable energy that includes not only inter alia biofuels, but also biomasses, wind and solar energy. And apart from that, the whole Article 24 of this framework is also dedicated to climate change. And it advocates using resource efficiently and sharing expertise on trading schemes, enhancing public and private sector financing instruments, and exchanging expertise in monitoring and analyzes GHG effects, and also support mitigation and adaptation actions of developing countries. So currently, this climate change is also regularly discussed during bilateral summits. The latest was held in June 2020. And actually, the EU-funded EU-Korea climate project also aimed at accelerating these climate actions in Korea, as in the European Union, and discussions on how to support South Korea's Green Deal are also taking place currently. And I would like to add that there are huge prospects for international cooperation between both regions in this area, because they would like to overcome these possible obstacles after the COVID-19 era, and climate change provisions in the EU-Korea framework agreement highlight the importance for potential cooperation, and specifically holding mutual meetings of the joint groups on energy, environment, and climate change.
Yes. Thank you for so precisely description. Yes. It was also very interesting. Thank you very much. So we have so good students. Yes, we are proud. Let me introduce now, invite to have the presentation, Dr. Nicolas Levy from the Polish Academy of Science from Warsaw. Yes. Yes. Dr. Levy disappeared now?
Yes.
Yes.
Disappeared.
I saw him just.
Yeah, me too, but it disappeared. What happened?
Yes.
Maybe there is some problem with connection.
Hello, this is the organizers. Well, we sent another email to Dr. Levy with logging information. So if he logged in already, that means he has it.
Yes. So okay. Yes. Just
Connected to outer. Yeah.
yes. I see Dr. Nicolas Levy. Could you start your presentation? I don't hear you. Just
yes. Good morning. Good morning. Excuse me. I had some technical issues, and that's why I was slightly late. Also, so first, let me thank you for being able to participate to this event. I was especially impressed by the presentation prepared by your student, Mrs. Radisława, which was very well prepared, had a great graphic approach, And congratulations again. I hope that we will meet again. By the way, if you can just remind me how many minutes do I have?
Around 15 minutes.
Around
Yes,
15
around 15 minutes. Yes.
Okay, so today I'm supposing I will do it, of course. I will talk about the impact of the policy of North Korea toward religion in this country, or if you prefer, the religious policies in North Korea.
Mhm.
For this purpose, I prepared a presentation also, which will be made online in a few seconds. Excuse me. Yes, I have it here. Yeah, that will be open. So when we speak about North Korean religion from a global, excuse me, I cannot open it. I don't know why. So again, so maybe before I start, my name is Nicolas Levy. I'm dealing with the Korean Peninsula, and especially with North Korean affairs since 18 years. And I'm especially dealing with North Korean economic and political matters. However, since 2 years, I'm trying to focus on issues dealing with cultural aspects in North Korea. And one, unfortunately, I cannot open it, something is wrong. And one of these items that I'm focusing on are the cultural and religious aspects. When we speak about religious matters in North Korea, we can keep in mind that North Korea is quite often described as being an anti-religious state, which may be characterized by an official, at least, hostile attitude toward religions and state policies which oppose an important public role of religion. It must be taken in account that despite the content of the North Korean Constitution of 1948 and 1972, which are stating that citizens of the DPRK, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which is the official name of North Korea, have freedom of religious belief and of conducting religious services. So the North Korean political system had a policy which was disastrous for the traditional religious life of North Korea. There were many repressions against those who used to be religious officials. One of them was organized against Francis Hong Yong-ho, who was the Catholic Bishop of Pyongyang, imprisoned or put in jail in 1949 and missing since then. Later on, till the beginning of the Korean War in 1950, all Buddhist temples, Confucian schools, or any shrines related to folk beliefs also suffered greatly by being simply closed. This was, of course, also due to the land reform which were passed in North Korea and in 1946, which simply confiscated many religious temples by the North Korean state. We must keep in mind that religious matters represented an important part, represented an important aspect in the daily life of the North Korean population. I have in mind one quotation from a former North Korean ambassador to Poland, Oh Kuk-bon, who was there between 1954, who was in Warsaw, between 1954 and 1958, who said during an interview with a Polish journalist that is a translation that I made from Polish, our villages strictly professes Buddhism. However, only elderly people are sincerely religious. The Catholic population prevailed among the urban population, while the war destroyed all Catholic temples. The Japanese occupation introduced a third religion to the country, which was used as an instrument of their politics. The war against Japan was also a war against their religion. So we can see here that the perception of the North Korean government toward religion was close to the perception of the Leninist doctrine, which looked at religion as being the opium of the people. Of course, the most important target here was the most present religion in North Korea, which was Christianity, and considered by Kim Il-sungists as being an imperialist force, but also other religions were not excluded from these persecutions. After the liberation of the Korean Peninsula from the occupation from Japan in 1945, there were still many Buddhist reformers, Christian activists who wanted to spread their teaching all around the Korean Peninsula. If we base on statistics made by Korean, still North Korean institution in this period, there were around 518 temples related to Buddhism which were existing in North Korea. There were also several religious organizations which were functioning. Among others, there were 3 Buddhist organizations. However, after the establishment of the North Korean state in September of 1948, the majority of religious organizations started to be subordinated under political organizations such as the United Democratic Patriotic Front. What is important to underline, but I will just provide one sentence about it, is that Kim Il-sung, the Prime Minister of North Korea starting from 1948 till 1970, had also a background related to religious. His father was a Protestant, and some members of his family were engaged in some religious matters. After the Korean War was a kind of support to the persecutions made toward religious persons in North Korea. The most important, the element which supported the policy of Kim Il-sung was simply the destruction of religious temples during the Korean War. The second element to consider is that religious persons were considered as being anti-communist. We mention it about Christian civilians, but it does also apply to other religions, including
the Buddhism one. That is why, for instance, Buddhists started to be heavily controlled with the implementation in 1957 of the North Korean social stratification system named Songbun. Meanwhile, within this system based in 51 categories, Buddhists were classified in the category 37, among with Protestants and Catholics, as being people who cannot be trusted. In the following years, the remaining monks who were still able to practice in North Korea were simply disappeared from any religious life, being removed into the army or being killed in North Korean prison camps. In 1958, it must be also underlined that a major anti-religious campaign was launched in order to fully eradicate any North Korean believers. In 1972, the North Korean Constitution elaborated a longer definition of freedom of religious belief. Citizens have the freedom of religious belief. This right is granted through the approval of the construction of religious buildings and the holding of religious ceremonies. This item was new in comparison to the Constitution of 1948. However, in this new version of the Constitution, the authors added that religion must be not used as a pretext for drawing in foreign forces or for harming the state or the so-called social order. Starting from the 80s, North Korea authorities started to use religious temples available in North Korea as being a source of financement of the government. What I mean here is that due to a decreasing or a worsening economic situation in North Korea, the purpose of the North Korean government was to attract a lot of tourists to the country. That is why they opened their heritage to foreign tourists who are able to visit it. Secondly, also due to the economic context, humanitarian organizations were made able to come to North Korea. For this reason, many South Korean Buddhist organizations participated to the transfer of food support, of technical support to North Korea. This especially applied in the 19th. The most important organization that I want to mention here is the organization which is led by the Venerable Panmunjom, who is a South Korean Buddhist monk focused on the unification on the Korean Peninsula, and led the previously mentioned organization called Good Friends. Furthermore, this improvement, the support, which was, for instance, estimated to be several dozen of millions of USD, may be also underlined by the presence of several hundreds of Buddhist representatives from South Korea who visited North Korea, for instance, at the reopening of the crucially important Shingye Temple in November 2016. It is important because the Shingye Temple is one of the most famous places of worship of the Korean Buddhism. There is one more element that I would like to underline here, and that will be the last one. The religious legacies are also presented on a regular basis in the North Korean press. However, this legacy is also used, this religious legacy is also used as being a propaganda tool, as North Korean journalists underline the damages which were made to religious temples as being caused by American bombing which occurred during the Korean War. So in other words, this legacy was not, according to the North Korean press, this legacy was not destroyed by North Korean authorities, but by Japanese or American bombings. For instance, what I found in one of the North Korean, in Korea, a North Korean newspaper, an English-speaking North Korean, an English North Korean newspaper, the temple was destroyed by the indiscriminate bombing by the US imperialists during the Fatherland Liberation War. On here, there is an important information as the reconstruction of the temple was made due to the benevolency of the policy of the Workers' Party of Korea. I quote, "The temple was restored to its original state after the war and has been preserved as a valuable cultural heritage thanks to the policy of the WPK on the state on preserving cultural relics." I will quote one more sentence. "Anguk Temple is preserved in its original state thanks to the country's policy of preserving the national cultural heritage." So finally, I wanted to demonstrate that the North Korean regime initially destroyed any remembrances, let me say, related to the Korean heritage, except some temples, which later were used as a propaganda tool and may be used for economic reasons. Thank you again for your attention. And of course, if you will need it, I will be pleased to share the presentation that I have done regarding these matters. And of course, I am open to any remarks and questions. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, also was very interesting. And let me now present my presentation. Just a moment, I will share my screen. Just a moment. Very strange this one.
There is an epidemic, as I see.
Yes, something, I don't know what's happened, that it is so...
I transferred my presentation from one file to another, and that is why I could not open it, unfortunately.
This is so strange. Always something happen.
Unfortunately.
And before I check and everything work well. Why this is so small? I don't understand. Just a moment, please.
Take it easy.
Maybe I can, maybe somebody can help me. First, maybe I will try to share, and I don't know what's happened and why it's so small. Just a moment, sure. Oh, here, sure. And for,
Okay,
can you see? But
Yes,
I don't know
yes.
why it's so small.
Maybe on podcast slide or you try
Just a
podcast
moment. Better? Oh no,
Yeah, that
maybe
is
better,
perfect.
yes. Yes, okay, so let me now briefly explain the other problem on Korean Peninsula. Inter-Korean diplomacy during the Moon Jae-in administration, the summit of 2018. Just a moment, I can do this, okay. Historically, there have been 5 inter-Korean summits. The first was in June 2000, and the second one was in October 2007. Moon Jae-in administration policy towards North Korea, we cannot understand without understanding Moon's policy and Moon's policy, which is continuation of North Korean policy of the 2 former presidents, the sunshine policy of Kim Dae-jung and peace and prosperity policy of Roh Moo-hyun. Yes, here we have Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun. Okay. So we can see here that in 2018, it was 1, 2, 3 inter-Korean summits, but before it was the first one in 2000, it was historical summit, and in 2007 also was, it was the second one. Just here, I can notice. Okay, okay. Despite tension built up over 2017 with North Korea's 6th nuclear test, Pyeongchang sent, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused now because I don't know if you see the same what I see, sure, okay.
Everything.
Yes, everything going well, okay. Pyongyang sent a delegation to the Winter Olympics in February 2018. Pyeongchang was important event. Koreans show that they have hope for future reunification, and also they show that still they believe that they can be one nation. Now, Korean nation, of course. The North Korean representation consisted of over 300 participants, singers, an orchestra, a taekwondo demonstration team, and the famous all-female cheerleading squad. The 2 Koreas and the Pyeongchang Olympics. It was a big event. We could see the North and South Koreans march in the opening ceremony together under a unification flag. It was a common success of South and North Korean diplomacy, the Pyeongchang. Okay. Moon Jae-in policy on the Korean Peninsula provide also special peace initiative based on spirit of mutual respect and open policy. And It consists of the 3 goals: resolution of the North Korean nuclear issue and establishment of a permanent peace, development of sustainable inter-Korean relations, realization of new economic community on the Korean Peninsula. Also 4 strategies, taking a step-by-step and comprehensive approach, tackling the issues of inter-Korean relations and the North Korean nuclear threat simultaneously, ensuring sustainability through institutionalization, laying the foundation for peaceful unification through mutual beneficial cooperation. Also, North Korean policy of Moon Jae-in administration have 5 principles: Korea-led initiative, strong defense, mutual respect, interaction of the people, and international cooperation. The April 2018 summit was the 3rd summit between South and North Korea, and it was a big moment. I watched this when Kim Jong-un talked about peace on the Korean Peninsula. Yes, and the Panmunjom Declaration was important achievement. This is something going, excuse me, maybe now I have some problem, and maybe just a moment, why? Okay. What's happened? Can you read my presentation now, or also you cannot see exactly? Very strange. The Panmunjom Declaration was an important event, achievement of the summit. The 2 sides will reconnect the blood relations of the nation and bring forward the future of prosperity and independent reunification led by Koreans, by achieving comprehensive and historical improvement and development in inter-Korean relations. Also, the aim was remove the danger of the war on the Korean Peninsula, and also work about reduce military tension. Other summit was unexpected. We can call even that it was a surprise summit. The summit comes as the 2 sides continue efforts to put a historic US-North Korea summit back on track. US President Donald Trump, of course, former President Donald Trump, canceled the summit scheduled to be held in Singapore on 12 June. But later, again, he agreed and the meeting was done. Other summit, in September, the 5th Inter-Korean Summit. And of course, also in this time, the Pyongyang Joint Declaration was important achievement of the summit. The 2 sides agreed to the expansion of the cessation of military hostility in regions of confrontation such as DMZ, to the substantial removal of danger of war across the entire Korean Peninsula, and a fundamental resolution to the problem of hostile relations. The 2 sides agree to pursue substantial measures to future advance exchanges and cooperation based on the spirits of mutual benefit and shared prosperity, and to develop the nation's economy in a balanced manner. Also, the two sides agreed to strengthen humanitarian cooperation and to fundamentally resolve the issue of separate families, which was divided during Korean War. Other issues like that the two sides agreed to actively promote exchanges and cooperation in various fields, so to enhance the atmosphere of reconciliation and unity, and to demonstrate the spirit of the Korean nation, both internally and externally. The two sides shared the view that the Korean Peninsula must be turned into a land of peace, free from nuclear weapons and nuclear threats, and that substantial progress toward this end must be made in prompt manner. Of course, it is hope. And also it is interesting that Chairman Kim Jong-un agreed to visit Seoul at the early date at the invitation of South Korean President Moon Jae-in. Lastly, a few conclusions. Despite South Korean President Moon Jae-in appeals for dialogue and peace following his inauguration on May 10, 2017, he didn't make his political dreams come true. The Moon government's peace initiative was an ambitious project to create a nuclear weapons-free, peaceful, and prosperous Korean peninsula. The South Korean president wants to continue peace talk with North Korea, despite the missile test race in the Korean peninsula. We must remember that North Korea has not tested any nuclear weapons since 2017. Yes? Moon Jae-in said he will continue dialogue and diplomacy to achieve peace and prosperity in the region. Peace talks with North Korea are still incomplete, despite so many efforts which was done, despite 3 inter-Korean summits in 2018 and a historic summit between United States and North Korea in Singapore and later also in Hanoi, as we know. It is clear that Moon's inter-Korea peace process is deadlocked amid growing tension between China and US. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I hope. Okay. Let me now invite our last panelist. Just a moment. Mr. Karol Starowicz, yes?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. We don't have much time, so I will be brief. Yeah, that's good. Okay. The main purpose of my speech is to present the possible foreign policy directions of the current US president towards North Korea. The analysis of the US foreign policy towards the Democratic People's Republic of Korea can lead to the conclusions that an issue of Kim dynasty nuclear ambitions is an unsolvable problem, because since the first nuclear crisis on the Korean Peninsula in the early 1990s, The North Korea problem has been a challenge for every US administration. And in my opinion, there's good reason to believe that the statement North Korea remains an enigma is appropriate to describe the problem of US-North Korea relations. In 2018, Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un began a diplomatic approachment. In consequence of Singapore summit, Kim publicly agreed to work toward complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, pledging permanent dismantlement of nuclear facilities in Myeongdong. Of course, as the United States takes corresponding measures. Next, the leaders met again in Vietnam in late February 2019, but ended the summit early without making a deal or announcement because of differences over the scope and sequencing of North Korea denuclearization measures in exchange for sanction relief. The current question is how the US would convince North Korea to come back to the negotiation table after Hanoi summit, what Biden will do with the North Korean problem, and finally, can Biden reach a breakthrough with North Korea? The biggest reason why the US has to resume talks with North Korea is the North's growing nuclear and military capabilities. Today, North Korea has a sizable nuclear arsenal, composite not only of atomic bombs fueled by plutonium or highly enriched uranium, but likely also hydrogen bombs at least 10 times more powerful than the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Pyongyang has also made remarkable progress with long-range missile technology. Not without a reason, the nuclear weapons arsenal described it as a powerful sword in the North Korean military. In consequence, nevertheless, the North Korean nuclear arsenal poses a threat to the international security. The Trump era was defined by headline-catching developments from fire and fury threats, historical summit, and love letters to no deal, because we don't have deal exactly. Since the failed North Korea-US summit in Hanoi, Kim has demanded to recognize his country as a nuclear state. Of course, the US cannot do this because if they recognize North Korea as a nuclear-owned state, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty could immediately break down. The US would never accept this deal, of course. It could also create a domino effect around the world, encouraging other countries to develop nuclear weapons concurrently. In addition, Pyongyang has consistently demanded that the US and South Korea remove the so-called hostile policy as a precondition for any negotiations. Early on May 2021, Joe Biden met Moon Jae-in, and he promised a practical, gradual, step-by-step approach to denuclearization while maintaining the international sanction regime. Biden and Moon Jae-in have emphasized the importance of the alliance and reaffirmed their common goals in the region, including peaceful Korean Peninsula with no nuclear missile. Of course, for the US, South Korea remains an essential part of any peace deal with North Korea. In contrast to Trump, Biden will not intend to take the issue of North Korea's nuclear ambitions personally, but will base future diplomatic efforts on cooperation with Republic of Korea. But of course, there may be some differences between allies. The Moon administration has consistently pursued a dialogue, saying it is the only way to build a peaceful Korean peninsula. However, Biden seems very skeptical about it because successful policy needs carrot as well as sticks. And the Biden administration has signaled its willingness to meet with North Korea, but the United States wants particular steps on denuclearization before any sanctions relief. We should remember that North Korea continues to be under heavy economic sanctions, and North Korea demands sanctions relief before any moves to dismantle its nuclear arsenal. Even now, with a new US administration in office, North Korea hasn't been active in seeking channels to resume the stalled talks between the two countries. When Biden became the US president, Washington reached out to Pyongyang with detailed messages through multiple channels, but North Korea hasn't responded. The question is how the Biden administration tempt North Korea back to the table. We have to remember in the past, negotiation and nuclear deal between North Korea and the United States was challenging since the Kim regime has strong tendencies to cheat. Washington was hoping, of course, to see Pyongyang cooperate by disarming, but however, Pyongyang preferred to reap the benefits of the cooperation without resigning from its deterrent, using it as an insurance. In the result, the diplomatic impasse continues because the two sides cannot find a way to trust each other. However, we can say in the era of the COVID-19 pandemic, Pyongyang appears more willing to cooperate. In addition, the country is, like I said, deep economic trouble, and Kim's unprecedented recognition that North Korea has failed to fulfill its latest economic plans speaks of the gravity of current situation. And the coronavirus pandemic has also taken its toll on the country, and Kim desperately needs a moment of stability, making him more likely to agree to meaningful concession as long as they do not threaten the security of his regime. In the current political circumstances, the only achievable goal for Biden administration will be return to negotiations, but achieving something more in the course of the negotiation seems to be unattainable at the moment. Kim would need a clear reason to come back to the table. What is more, total denuclearization would be a huge undertaking, and Kim Jong-un is not going to be keen to throw away decades of research. We have to come to realize that North Korea wants to belong to the club of nuclear states no matter what. In this case, the only solution to restrain North Korea from the nuclear development in reverse is a reversal of American policy. Biden would have to revive multilateral talks, maybe resumption of six-part talks on Korean nuclear issue, easy sanctions, and commit to concession to negotiation and mutually acceptable deal. Ultimately, the success of deal will depend on the ability of North Korea and the United States to overcome their mutual distrust, like I said. In this case, negotiations with North Korea are showing how difficult it is to create sustained trust and dialogue between two countries. And this mutual distrust has damped past efforts to settle a deal between the US and North Korea. In conclusions, I would like to say that history shows that there are no perfect outcomes between the US and North Korea. And for the Biden administration, diplomacy is preferred as a primary instrument for dealing with the North nuclear challenge. But we have to come to realize the clock is ticking the US disadvantage. Will Biden convince him to give up nuclear weapons? Will he make any concessions? These questions remain an unanswered mystery so far. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for also interesting presentation. Yes, and now I would like to open the question and comments parts. Maybe I will start. Maybe I have first.
I can start. Wojtek, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So we have time for questions, yes? Or comments?
Almost we have not time, but we can find time.
Okay.
A little bit.
Okay, thank you very much for interesting presentations. It is my comments to all of the panelists. And I have a questions for all panelists. Anyone interested in unification of Korea? Especially when we look at the costs of German reunification, who would invest in these projects? So this is my question number one. The second question, it's much more to Nicolas' speech. As for religious, is it a part of individual and religious is a part of individual and collective social identification for me. Examples include Jews in Judaism. During Spain, persecution in Spain, they were forced to convert to Catholicism, but for hundreds of years they prayed in their synagogues because it was a part of individual and collective identification to them. And the question is, for me, is this identification in Korea, when we are thinking about Korea problem and Korea religion in Korea and so on. And for the last speech about nuclear ambitions, Korean nuclear ambitions, my point is that we must remember that it is a commodity. An example for me is the construction of a reactor in Syria. Syria bought nuclear reactor in North Korea. Fortunately, it was detected and destroyed by Israel. But it was such a case that Korea constructed the copy of Pyongyang reactor and it was sold to Syria. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I don't know if I may start with my reflection. So from my point of view, the social identification that you are mentioning is also related to the ability to continue to practice religious patterns during the framework or within the framework of the North Korean regime. As I mentioned previously, the North Korean regime wanted to destroy any form of religious, and I would even say that it was completed by the simple destruction of temples which occurred during the Korean War. So what comes to my mind is, was the Korean War an instrument in order to destroy the religious framework, the religious heritage in North Korea? I'm not so sure that it was an instrument, but it was for sure, let's say, it was benefic for the policy of the North Korean regime. After the Korean War, on the stratification of the North Korean population in the system of 51 classes that I mentioned previously,
the North Korean population was strongly afraid of showing its religious beliefs, even inside, even within the population. It is due also to the fact that the North Korean population is not only controlled by external organizations such as state organization, but also from in the internal point of view. What I mean here is that within, let's say, not a district, but rather a quarter, which consists of 1 up to 10 buildings, there is always 1 or 2 persons which aim is, whose aim are to transmit informations about strange, let me say, behaviors of the population living in this quarter. So any possibility, any, let's say, willingness to speak about religious is not only controlled by external, but also by internal authorities, which automatically make it more complicated. However, the social identification that you mean is probably easier to be fulfilled for people who are out of the main cities. Why? Because the stratification that I mentioned, the control was especially important in major, is especially important in major cities of North Korea, such as Chongjin, Pyongyang, Wonsan, or Sinuiju. But when we come to further areas, I would say in the mountains of North Korea or in the center of the country, then a closer identification to religions is much more easier to be realized. Regarding the second point that you mentioned related to the unification, I would even dare to say that Moon Jae-in, in spite of his ideology, which is driven through the unification, may use the pattern of unification as being a strategy similar to the one applied by Donald Trump that I will call the patience strategy. There is this propaganda element of unification that nobody believes in due to the cost that you mentioned, due to other parameters. But it is better to speak about unification because if we stop to speak about unification, the potential danger of a conflict is automatically arriving. That is my perception, of course. And regarding who will pay the cost in terms of unification, may be similar to what happened after the Yugoslavian war, when foreign currencies were introduced in this country, foreign army and so on. However, there were no China close to Yugoslavia. That's why it may be much more complicated. In one research paper, on 1 minute I need, that I wrote 10 years ago, I consider that even in the collapse of North Korea, the country will remain to exist, but not as the North Korea that we know, but as a country under Chinese influence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, maybe I can also have the just 2 questions. I have a question for Professor Brudelski. What is the future of the relationship between the South Korean military and United Nations Command?
The problem is that Republic of Korea was not signed armistice agreement, and North Korea and a lot of places and war general United Nations mission was rescue Republic of Korea. And I know a lot of the legal interpretation, armistice treaty, and the future. The outcome treaty plan is signed, and the problem was political. Before it was tension. Now is the COVID situation, and with my discussion, my visit in Korea with Korean generals, the same I have good relations with American, the Minich colonel, the former lot of military, this mark military armistice command. And the problem is this armistice treaty mechanism doesn't working, that North Korea made policy from beginning of 2000 undermine this and was end the problem. I agree with General Robert Abrams. This is now looking for status quo. This armistice is a guarantee for peace, and was not special accident. And I look like looking for a political science or international group of interest. In North Korea, in South Korea, military is a very strong group of interest. When looking for the future, like will be unification in this, how North Korea exist only in isolation and have that. I remember talks with assistant from Kim Il-sung University after Moon Jae-in visit asked me. They was very interested and the lot was very afraid. And this K-pop visit group like Red Velvet Order. And now North Korea, Kim Jong-un go this, I read a lot of this papers and explanation is total stupid. And like this three revolution movement now was Kim Il-sung sites and result. I remember my visit for the exhibition Three Revolution and was old radio apparatus, and I was new, and I think implanted in Poland in 60s. This North Korea is still a paradoxal country, and the problem is for the interest group of interest, strong military, role of party. And when will be North Korean regime collapse? I agree with Nikolai that will be Chinese troops go to the zone near this border now between China and North Korea, and very interested is the future. In 9th of March will be elections in South Korea, president elections. The candidate of opposition, former Prosecutor General Yoon, is conservative, and he said that unification is nothing. And Governor Gyeonggi province was near DMZ, is very interested for the same cooperation. Now is very difficult, and I heard that was now to South Korea and the visit DMZ is still open, and the problem is for Moon and this administration is cooperation with North Korea, and this plan open North Korean society. I remember a seminar in Polish embassy 2013 was about the role Neutral Nation Supervisory Commission, and Swedish Ambassador Danielsson said that North Korea will be open. And I asked him, how is program, how open North Korea? the politician group party on think tank. We know how really open North Korea they get the Nobel Prize. Now the policy Kim Jong-un, he afraid every influence from abroad, the same look for South Korea and for the future, but now have they a very weak point or very weak NOFED 860 ton deficit for this public distribution program connected with Sonbun made by Kim Il-sung for all tradition Korea, and this near 1 year half block and close lockdown with China now is preparing again the railway track, and the North Korea agreed the same with Nikolai about this North Korean approach. For a lot of American experts, look that Donald Trump go too fast, and he recognized North Korea like nuclear state. Was official agreement and denuclearization, and the problem is we have no time, but I think next session will be start. The same I later on discuss, and 5 minutes for each paper is no chance. I think we must continue this program in Asian Congress in May in Tor. Yes, I invite like Vice President Asia Pacific Society in Poland. This panel, Professor Grażyna is the same founder of this Asia Pacific, and the other possibility.
I have some questions from Mr. Farid, and I would like to say it is very hard to predict what will happen next, because 2 days ago the White House announced US diplomatic boycott of Winter Olympics in Beijing. And in my opinion, this is a crying shame, because in 2018, Pyeongchang Olympics brought diplomatic rapprochement between Korean states. Even more, the US and North Korea started dialogue. But what we have right now, we have more declarations only. Yes, some small public projects. Yes, maybe economic aid. But we have to remember that Biden administration takes the view that lifting economic sanctions cannot happen unless the North Korea returns to the table negotiations. And of course, Washington would ask Pyongyang to follow long-term denuclearization process on the basic of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also known as the Iran nuclear deal. But in this case, its relations between the US and North Korea is really complicated. And it is, in my opinion, unlikely that the Biden administration would demand that North Korea completely dismantle every nuclear complex in a short period of time. So, in my opinion, we have to be patient and wait in this case.
Thank you, Professor. Sometimes I have an impression for such kind of talks or negotiations that the sides have something special in their mind, somewhere deep in their conscience, and they just don't want to go forward.
Yes.
They have another plans and they never declare. Maybe
Yes.
it is somehow linked to China. I don't know.
This is a good way, because maybe in the future it could be that the US will need to bring North Korea back to the negotiation table by pushing for the 4-party talks, or maybe even 6-party talks from the past, on North Korean nuclear program. But we know history. Yes.
Yes, this is good question, for example, about the future of 6-party talks, yes, as a diplomatic way to solve the nuclear problems of North Korea, yes?
Yes.
And one more question, if possible.
About future.
No, not about future. I have a question. My question is, sometimes I'm also suspicious about the 6-side talks, because why do we need 6 sides? Means 6 problems at least, right? So why don't they go at least with 2-side talks in order to have somehow or some kind of connection with North Korea or Iran or someone else? But on the contrary, they are putting too much conditions, 6 sides, so many conditions. So at least if they won't agree, they can agree at least on some small details in order to have a precedent. That is very suspicious for me again.
Excuse me for my comment, but North Korea now don't wish any continue 6-party talks, is interested on the 4-party talks. Japan for North Korea position and Russia will be excluded for this new negotiation in the future. And for North Korea, very important on the relations with United States and negotiation with United States. And this behavior is special, and look for opinion. North Korean ambassador to Poland, Mr. Chael, said that Biden continue Obama politics. No special action, no activity, and to go to sustain status.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Maybe if I may say something.
Yes, please.
Regarding your comment, can they move forward through some small public projects in order to show the world to the Korean people? So we'll just say from my perspective, that will be very, very short answer. I am currently working with a South Korean organization which is dealing with North Korean defectors, and we try to find some examples of let's say, non-political entrepreneurship projects which can be made practiced in North Korea. So I will give you an example, but that's not the point, because it was already implemented in North Korea. For instance, you do have outside fitness rooms. It's a non-political element. It is available in other countries. It's already available in North Korea, but that is an example. So I prepared a list of projects which after are checked by North Korean defectors, and they tell if it can be implemented in North Korea or not. So what it should be, I found I have some ideas, unfortunately, that I cannot disclose today, which are on the step 2, which were acknowledged by North Korean defectors, who say, yes, it makes sense. We can implement it through our channels in North Korea. And the purpose here is to modify the habits of the North Korean society by using Western patterns, but of course, which are practically free of charge. So let me give you another example. For instance, the fact of sending books to North Korean libraries, for instance. That is only an example. The project is much more longer. It is for 6 months, but that is a way, if you prefer, South Korean organization working with defectors try to bring elements from abroad out of South Korea and to make them practical in North Korea. How? Because this organization, they have their own, let me say, channels of distribution, their own people who are inside North Korea. And it must be noted that those who are in South Korea, they are able to do something in North Korea. They have their relations in the country. I have met a lot of defectors from North Korea who told me very often that they were still able to call people in this country to know what happened to their family, etc. So that is a way to behave, I would say, from a micro level.
Yes, and hopefully the non-political agenda is much wider
Yes.
between North Korea and the rest part of the world compared to political agenda. And
Definitely.
this is the winning point, win-win situation.
Yeah, definitely. But some projects failed regarding these issues. One of them is the Chosen Exchange project, where basically the management board left. It is a program which was aimed of training North Korean abroad in Singapore, Europe, etc. But basically the management board left the company because it was too tough to do, especially as the project was considered by the sanctions of the Security Council of the United Nations, unfortunately. So it's getting tough and tough to be involved in social projects which have a non-political scope, let me say. That's the point from my perspective.
Okay, we must finish our panel, and Ms. Władysława will have other panel too, yes, and Mr. Karosowicz too. So I would like to thank you very much for today's meeting and your presentation, and I hope we can meet next year and we can have also full of discussion, and we can enjoy our in person the meeting during conference. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Dziękuję bardzo. Thank you
Dziękuję
very
bardzo. Tak,
much. Kamsahamnida.
dziękujemy bardzo. Tak. Tak. No, dziękuję panu profesorowi bardzo też za prowadzenie i miejmy nadzieję, że się spotykamy za rok, tak już inaczej, że ta pandemia w końcu minie i będziemy mogli się spotkać na wydziale. Dziękuję wszystkim. Dziękuję. Do widzenia. Thank you.
Do widzenia.